Hi everyone. Okay, so I actually listened to a video today, and well, it's a video I felt I just feel right that it will add some level of value to us. Okay, so for some of us that are struggling with what's this maybe struggling to memorize some things and that want to improve or multiply our learning adventure. You want to improve in our learning process, like you want to learn more so that you can apply so much to life, right? So why not? It's a video you want to listen to. But hey, I will be doing okay. This is how I want to do it. I'll be taking it in beats, maybe 2 minutes, 2 minutes video, so that it's not so much. So I'll just be breaking it in bits, in parts, right? So subsequently, I'll be sharing the other ones, right? So just enjoy this, enjoy the video, right? Okay. So keep learning and keep enriching lives. Bye for now.
My name is Nishant Kasibatla. I am a Grandmaster of Memory and a Guinness record holder. I'm also a professional speaker. See, many times, a lot of people, they struggle with retention when they're reading. And pretty much it happens because they might be ignoring some fundamental principles, the way I call them. And let me just give you some of them here. So I see reading, especially since we're talking about retention for reading, I see reading as a multi-step process. It's not, reading is not like, you open the book, you read it, you close the book, and then boom, yeah, I've learned it. And that's not the way it works. But unfortunately, a lot of people really do that. So what is the multi-step process I'm talking about? The first thing is pre-reading. Before you begin the process of reading, you must do something which I call it as pre-reading. Now what that means is you just quickly browse through what is the information that you're about to read. Now the objective of the pre-reading is not really to understand anything or even to remember anything. It's just kind of setting you in the mood of reading, kind of gauge the difficulty of the material. So get yourself familiarized with the concept of what is it that you're about to read. So just that maybe 2 or 3 or maybe 4 minutes, depending on the how much amount of information that you're reading for that session, that actually gives you a huge advantage over people who just boom jump into reading. So that's the first step, which is pre-reading. Do not ignore that. That's a bad thing if you do that. The second thing is actually reading. Now of course everyone does it, you do it, reading. So the twist here is when you're reading, make sure you're focusing on two very important aspects. Number one, you're reading with attention. Number two, you're reading for comprehension. Now, do not mix reading with scrolling. And that's what happens a lot of time these days. You're reading and then you have your phone nearby, and then once you pick up the phone, you start scrolling. It could be Instagram, it could be YouTube, doesn't really matter what it is. But the thing is, when you're not focusing, you're messing up big time on retention. You can't really retain the information. So you pay attention and you read with an intention to comprehend. That's what reading is. And here comes one of the most important concepts: what you do after reading. Reading is not just read and then stop with it. You need to do what I call as post reading. So after you read, pause and ask yourself, okay, what is it that I've learned today? Give some work to your brain, because if you don't test yourself, then it's very likely that you might forget the information pretty soon. When I say pretty soon, it could be an hour after you read. So get into the habit of recalling what is it that you've learned. So when you combine pre-reading with reading with post-reading, you're really covering some of the fundamental principles of reading, and that'll actually set you an advantage over others who don't use this or use all these steps actually. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of focus, importance of concentration while reading. Now, I see memory as a 3-step process, and I call them the 3 R's of memory. The first R is registration. Now, registration is the process of storing information into your brain. So when you're reading, you're storing information into your brain. That's the first R. The second R is retention. Retention is how long can you hold the information in your brain. And of course, the third R is recall. Recall is your ability to bring out the information when you need it. Now, here's how focus is absolutely critical for the 3 R's. Because number one, if you don't focus, you can't register well. If you don't register well, you can't retain well. And if you can't retain well, you can't recall well. So if you want to improve your recall, you have to focus right from the start. So that's how important focus is. So don't take it for granted, work for it, and make sure you focus. That's going to be highly rewarding for you in the process of not only memory, but generally in your life as well. So one of the simple, especially when it comes to reading, one of the very simple things is just before you begin the process of reading, ask yourself a very simple question. And the question is this: am I in the right place for reading right now? In other words, is the place that I'm reading right now conducive for reading for the next 15 minutes, for the next 30 minutes, or for the next 1 hour? So just asking that question will make sure that you clean up your room a little bit, or maybe take away the distracting elements in your room, or maybe you want to shut the door or do something. Just ask yourself, is this the right environment for reading? And that alone will actually help you to make sure that the reading session will go with less distraction, or maybe you'll come to a time where you'll have absolutely zero distractions. One of the other things that you might want to really pay attention is changing the way you read when you approach different kinds of material. It's not like one technique for all. Let's say, for example, you're reading textbooks compared to reading a novel, or compared to reading a technical document. So yeah, your reading style has to definitely change. You can't be using one technique for all. And the reason is because all these different documents are written in different manners. So let's take, for example, textbooks. For textbooks, the absolute critical thing you should be really doing is pre-reading, like I already talked about. Pre-reading is a very important concept. Let's say, for example, you have a textbook that is 300 pages. Now, a lot of times what happens is people open the textbook, they read the first chapter, and then they read the second chapter, then they read the third chapter. Now, my suggestion is spend 1 hour and you try to do pre-reading for the whole textbook. Now, what you mean by that is, look at the chapters and go into each chapter even before you begin the year. Read the first chapter, read the important elements of that, just browse through it, go to the next chapter. Now again, if you don't understand anything, that's okay. If you don't remember anything, that's okay. The objective of this is to see what is the scope of the whole textbook, and how each chapter is linked with the next chapter, because that understanding will actually help you to have better memory, better comprehension later on when you actually get into the reading. So that's about textbooks. The second thing is, let's say, novels, for example. Now for novels, definitely don't do pre-reading, because that's going to kill the joy. You don't want to pre-read and know the plot beforehand. So for novels, I think probably the best technique is find yourself in a place where you can really chill, relax, enjoy the process of reading. That's all I can say for novels. Now when it comes to technical documents, now that's a little bit of complicated stuff, because most probably you're reading something for the first time in your life, so you really don't have much knowledge about that information. So for reading technical documents, one of the techniques that I talk about is you read the first component or the first unit or the first section of that, pause and ask yourself, okay, if I were to rephrase this in my own words, how would that look like? So finishing one section, asking yourself, how can I rephrase it in my own words, actually helps you to look at the document in a much better fashion. So again, you need to change the way you read for different types of information, and also it also depends on the objective. Are you reading just to gain understanding, or are you reading for examinations? So it also depends on how much focus, how much attention, how much testing you need to do yourself to make sure you pass that objective that you have in front of you. When it comes to improving a memory, one of the other important aspects that you should keep in mind is the importance of visualization. Whether you're reading or whether you're simply remembering, doesn't really matter. Visualization plays a very important role. So let me ask you a question. Go back to your school days. Do you really remember everything you learned from your school? Probably the answer is no, it's impossible, right? But probably you remember one or two concepts where your teacher helped you to visualize. For example, in my own life, I still remember the way my teacher explained the concept of, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Now that's just a phrase. It doesn't mean anything for a young child who's learning that concept for the first time. But my teacher explained the concept with the help of a rocket. the rocket going up, there's thrust of the engine, so every action has equal and opposite reaction. And just like that, not only I understood everything, but I remember that for the rest of my life. So again, in your life, you might have remembered some concepts simply because your teacher or any person who helped you to learn helped you to visualize that. So that's also probably why you've heard this thing before, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. So why do you say that? Why do we say that? Because whatever you see in a picture format, your brain tends to remember that information for a long time. Now, how do we use this in reading? Now, this is a tricky thing because it also depends on what kind of information that you're reading. If you're reading things that are easy to visualize, let's say a simple example, let's say I'm talking about photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, you have the leaves, you have the sun, you have the roots. All of these things are pretty easy to visualize. So when you're reading, don't just read it like, just a drab text. No, visualize, the sun rays falling on the leaves and the water is going into the roots. Just try to visualize that. That will actually help you to remember better. Now, what if it's not easy to visualize? So for that, I would suggest that, try to organize the information into a picture format. It could be a flow chart, it could be a mind map, for example, or draw some icons or draw some little pictures to help you visualize. So ultimately, whether you end up visualizing or not, the very act, the very effort you put in trying to visualize makes the whole learning process a fun process. So the question you need to ask yourself is, okay, how can I visualize this information? It's okay if you failed answering that question, but asking that question is critical because sometimes we underestimate ourselves. When you ask the question, hey, how can I visualize? Boom, your brain might supply an answer for that. So yeah, try asking that question. When it comes to reading, I think one of the very important element that many people are worried about, whether I'm doing right or wrong, is the concept of note-taking. Note-taking is a very important concept. It actually can help you to not only to organize your notes, but also, if done right, it can also help you with recall. Now, here's a fundamental question that you must ask yourself when you're taking notes. Is my note-taking only organizing the information, or is it really aiding me in the process of recall? Is it helping me to internalize the information? So let me give you, note-taking is a whole big concept. So I'm just going to give you maybe a couple of examples. So simple ideas of how you could organize your notes. So the first technique, it's called the outline method. Now it might look boring, but it really works. So what is an outline method? Outline method is pretty simple. Now, before that, let me tell you typically how people take notes. Now, I worked with students, I worked with people all over the world, and I've seen people taking notes. Now, what happens is typical notes look like this. They write a sentence, and they write another sentence, and they write another sentence, maybe a phrase, maybe some keywords. It's all a list of sentences or a list of words. Now, that does not aid you in recalling when you're doing the post-processing of note-taking. So, a good technique would be use the outline method. Now, what's an outline method? First of all, on the top, you write the topic. And on the left column, first you write the subheading, the main topic, and below that you write bullet points. Don't randomly write sentences, write the heading and write the bullet points. Now, why is that important? So first of all, first key idea, then you got bullet points. Second key idea, then you write the bullet points. The third key idea, bullet points. Now, why is that important? Because after you're done with the note taking, when you want to test yourself, all you need to do is to go back to the notes and you cover up the bullet points. And you ask yourself, okay, what is this all about? What is the first point? Okay, what did I write? This kind of note taking will facilitate you to test yourself. But if you're writing random sentences, how do you test yourself? You can't do that. So outline method is very simple. It might look boring, but it's just a way of neatly organizing the information to facilitate recall at a later stage. That's one. And probably the second one, it's a very popular technique. It's called mind mapping. Now I have a slight twist on mind mapping.